A United States Air Force F-16 Fighting Falcon made an emergency landing at an undisclosed airfield in western Saudi Arabia, following a combat mission in the region. The aircraft had been operating as part of ongoing coalition air operations, and initial reports provided no explanation for why the flight ended the way it did. Then Iranian state media stepped in with an explanation of their own. According to those reports, the F-16 was not grounded by a mechanical failure or a routine precautionary landing. It was struck over the Iranian city of Shiraz by the Majid air defense system, a short-range, truck-mounted mobile platform operated by Iranian forces. The claim was specific, detailed, and delivered with confidence. The name of the system, the location of the engagement, the identity of the aircraft, all of it was laid out by Iranian outlets before any Western military authority had said a single word publicly. That word, when it finally came, was carefully chosen. U.S. Central Command posted a statement on their official X account that read, "A U.S. Air Force F-16 Fighting Falcon lands at a base in the Middle East after a combat flight in support of Operation Epic Fury." Nothing more. No reference to an emergency landing. No mention of damage. No acknowledgement of Iranian claims. No information about the pilot. In the discipline of official military communication, the boundaries of a statement matter as much as its contents. CENTCOM confirmed the aircraft flew. It confirmed the mission framework. It confirmed the landing. It said nothing about how or why the mission ended the way it did. That is the gap at the center of this story, and it is a significant one. To understand what may have actually happened, and why the Iranian claim deserves serious analytical attention rather than immediate dismissal, it is necessary to examine the system at the core of that claim, and the broader shift in Iranian air defense doctrine that has been developing throughout this conflict. The Majid is not the kind of system that typically generates international headlines. It is not a long-range interceptor. It is not a sophisticated integrated air defense platform. Its maximum engagement range is approximately 8 kilometers, and it is mounted on a standard military truck chassis. By the conventional metrics used to evaluate air defense capability, it would not be considered a credible threat to a frontline fourth-generation fighter like the F-16. Its danger lies not in its range or altitude ceiling. It lies in how it operates. The Majid uses passive infrared guidance. It does not emit active radar signals to acquire and track its targets. Instead, it homes in on the heat signature produced by an aircraft's engine. This single design characteristic fundamentally changes the threat calculus. Active radar systems must transmit a signal to function, and that transmission is detectable. Coalition aircraft are equipped with systems specifically designed to identify radar emissions, and anti-radiation missiles have been part of Western air suppression doctrine for decades. Weapons that lock directly onto radar sources and destroy them. This is how Iran lost the overwhelming majority of its fixed air defense infrastructure in the opening phase of this conflict. Those systems emitted, they were located, and they were eliminated. The Majid system removes that vulnerability from the equation. Because it relies on infrared rather than active radar, it produces no detectable emission during an engagement. A Majid unit sitting in position, powered down and waiting, is for all practical purposes invisible to coalition electronic warfare systems. There is no signal to intercept. There is no source to locate and target. The system only activates for the minimum time necessary to complete an engagement, sometimes a matter of seconds, before shutting down and relocating. Before we continue, a quick note. This kind of in-depth analysis is being actively limited by the algorithm. If you want to support this content, take a moment to like the video and leave a comment below. That directly determines how many people this reaches. Now, back to the story. This operating philosophy did not emerge in isolation. It is the product of a deliberate and sustained adaptation by Iranian air defense commanders, who recognized early in this conflict that their existing model was no longer viable. The fixed, centralized air defense grid that Iran had built over many years was dismantled systematically by coalition airstrikes once it became clear that stationary emitting systems could be located and destroyed faster than they could be replaced. The response was a fundamental doctrinal shift. Abandon the fixed network, disperse into mobile units, eliminate radar emissions wherever possible, and adopt an ambush-based engagement model rather than a continuous coverage model. Under this approach, a Majid unit does not maintain a constant operational posture or attempt to monitor a broad sector of airspace. It moves to a position along a predicted flight corridor, shuts down all emitting systems, and waits. When a viable target enters the 8-kilometer engagement envelope, the system activates briefly, fires, and immediately relocates before any counterattack response can be coordinated. The tactical logic is straightforward. You cannot target what you cannot detect, and a system that never emits gives coalition electronic warfare assets nothing to work with. There are 3 analytical frameworks currently applicable to this incident, and each carries different implications. The first is a straightforward successful engagement. If the Iranian account is accurate, a Majid unit was pre-positioned along a flight corridor used by coalition aircraft, acquired the F-16 on its infrared sensors, and struck it within operational range. This would validate the mobile ambush doctrine Iran has been developing and would raise immediate questions within coalition air operations planning about how flight corridors are designated, how frequently they are varied, and whether existing countermeasures are adequate against passive infrared threats at close engagement ranges. The second framework involves not a single engagement, but cumulative threat density. Iranian forces may have deployed multiple systems across a broad area, creating overlapping coverage zones that collectively compensate for each individual unit's limited range. Under this interpretation, no single unit required perfect positioning. The aircraft entered a region where the probability of hostile contact was high enough that engagement became a matter of time rather than individual precision. This is the more concerning scenario, because it implies coordinated deployment at scale rather than an isolated tactical success. The third framework is deliberate strategic signaling. Iran may have held this capability in reserve, choosing to employ and publicize it at a moment calculated to produce maximum strategic effect. An F-16 making an emergency landing in Saudi Arabia, publicly attributed to an Iranian system, sends a simultaneous message to Washington, to coalition partners, and to domestic Iranian audiences. It complicates operational planning, raises the perceived cost of continued air operations, and establishes a deterrence signal without requiring a formal diplomatic exchange. CENTCOM's statement read against this backdrop takes on additional weight. Operation Epic Fury is the named framework under which the F-16 was operating. That designation confirms this is not an isolated sortie, but part of a structured, ongoing operational campaign. The aircraft that made the emergency landing in Saudi Arabia was flying a combat mission within that campaign. The question of what interrupted that mission remains officially unanswered. The regional implications are direct. Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Israel, and Jordan all operate air assets in corridors potentially exposed to the same threat methodology. The Majid system is not unique. It represents a replicable doctrine, and Iran has both the incentive and the established supply chains to transfer that methodology to proxy forces operating across Yemen, Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon. A dispersed, passive, mobile, short-range air defense capability in the hands of non-state actors would represent a qualitatively different threat environment for every air force operating in the region. At the level of great power competition, this incident will not go unanalyzed. Moscow and Beijing both maintain active research programs focused on countering Western air superiority. An engagement in which a passive, truck-mounted system with an 8-kilometer range may have successfully struck a frontline American fighter generates intelligence interest that extends well beyond the immediate theater of operations. The questions that will define how this incident is ultimately assessed remain open. Was the F-16 operating at an altitude within the Majid's effective engagement envelope? Were the aircraft's infrared countermeasure systems active at the time? How did Iranian forces develop targeting intelligence about the probable flight path? And critically, is this the first such engagement? Or are there prior incidents that were attributed to mechanical causes or simply not disclosed? CENTCOM says the F-16 landed at a base in the Middle East after a combat flight. Iran says it knows exactly why that flight ended when it did. The United States has not said otherwise. The full account of what happened over Shiraz, if anything did, has not yet been told by anyone with the authority and the evidence to tell it definitively. What is established is this: the air defense environment over this region is more complex than it appeared several months ago. The assumption that degrading Iran's fixed radar network would neutralize its air defense capability requires serious re-examination. And a named American combat operation now has an aircraft on the ground in Saudi Arabia with no official explanation for how it got there. The analysis of what that means is only beginning.